our brains are designed to protect us. So when something harmful happens before we are able to cope with it and to comprehend it even, it will keep it from us. And then the lost self is formed. And then you're 27. Why am I so depressed? Hello, my name is Katusha, your sex and relationship coach. Difficult subject today. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, the parasite keeps on giving. Why did I name my video this way? Because I do not know the percentage, but lots of people, lots of sexual abusers have been sexually abused themselves in their childhood. They have been exposed to carnal knowledge in their childhood, and so they adopt this parasite and then keep on giving it to other generations. It's this perpetuated cycle of profound emotional abuse. Before we dive in, please consider to subscribe, and most importantly, hit that notification bell so you do not miss another video. Let's begin. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested last year on charges of sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy to engage in sex trafficking. He died in custody a month later. Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's associate, so-called half ex-girlfriend, half employee, half best friend, and fixer, helped Jeffrey Epstein exploit and abuse minor girls as young as the age of 14. In Netflix documentary, one girl states that as young as 12 years old. In some cases, she participated in the sexual abuse. But usually, she approached the girls, she groomed them, made them to trust her, and led them to the arms of Jeffrey Epstein. It's interesting, in the documentary, Filthy Rich on Netflix, when Jeffrey Epstein is being questioned whether he abused girls by a prosecutor, he's very calm. He just keeps saying, I'd like to answer that question, but I'll take the fifth. And when he's asked a question on Mr. Epstein, have you been molested, sexually molested in your childhood? Something happens to him. He flips, he rips the microphone apart, and he tries to leave the room. And then the scene changes. Usually sex offenders have been sexually molested, have been broken in their own childhood. This documentary not only talks about a long-term effects of sexual abuse and what a profound emotional damage it causes to people. 1 in 3 girls in the United States are sexually abused. 1 in 6 boys in the United States are sexually abused. Half of transgender folks in the United States have been sexually abused. And that's only reported numbers. Only reported. So that means the numbers are even bigger. I never reported anything. I never thought it was even a big deal. My thing was like, nobody has to know. I don't want the world to find out I'm dirty at the age of 5, at the age of 8. I'll touch on it later. So this documentary not only talks about that, it touches upon the scope of the corruption at the top. Elite knew about it. Everyone around knew what he was doing, and some of them was participating. And I'm sure a lot of people are scared now since Ghislaine was arrested. Employees who worked on Jeffrey Epstein's island saw those people, saw them participating in sexual abuse. They saw Bill Clinton. They didn't confirm that he was participating, but they saw him on the island. Bill Clinton denied that he's ever been on the island. He denied that he's ever been on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, even though records showed that he's been on his plane for about 28 times. So it's interesting what's gonna come out of it. So the scope of this pyramid scheme was unbelievable. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of girls have been affected by it, and it's been going on since late 80s. Elite knew it, but somehow they chose to look the other way. Some wanted to participate in the sexual abuse pyramid, and some wanted the power and Jeffrey's money to reach their goals. Sexual abuse, or the exposure to unlawful carnal knowledge, has devastating long-term effects on people that manifest itself later on in life, usually late 20s, or when people have their own child. All of a sudden, like, my baby, and this was done to me, what if it's going to happen to my baby? And then they remember about their own baby, their lost self. That trauma start to come out, start begging you to do something about it, to integrate it, right, to heal it. So what are the long-term effects of sexual abuse? Shame, deep shame of who you are, long-term depression, deep sadness and unworthiness, disinterest towards life, inability to build relationship with people, hypersexuality. So there is this myth: if people don't say anything about the abuse at the time where it happens, they must be lying. This is not true. I tell you from the first person perspective. When it happened to me, I didn't tell anybody. In fact, my only thought was nobody, and especially my parents, must not know about it, because if they find out, they will stop loving me. I don't want them to think that I'm dirty and tainted. Children somehow think whatever happens, it's about them. They're the center of the world. I'm at fault. Something happened to me. I'm guilty of that. Nobody must know. Our brains are designed to protect us. So when something harmful happens before we are able to cope with it and to comprehend it even, it will keep it from us. And then the lost self is formed. And then you're 27. Why am I so depressed? Oh, my child is born and all these flashbacks are flooded and you can't live. You have to talk. And those victims, that's when they start talking. And by simply started talking, that's when the healing begins. What is sexual abuse? It can be on a spectrum. You can be exposed to adult genitals, right? You can be asked to touch. Someone touches you. You can be raped. It can be from a stranger, it can be from your father, mother, grandfather, uncle, even aunt, or neighbor who is babysitting you. And it's usually someone that you actually know and you trust that person, and you're confused. He's giving me chocolates, he's so kind to me, he's playing with me, he's taking me to the park, and then he's like touching me. Well, children don't know, but they feel. I'll tell you my story. So when I was 5 years old, I remember that age, 5 years old, in the kindergarten, our group, our teacher took us to the Spark. And my friend and I decided to explore. I said, let's go and try to explore, get away from the group. We ran away so we were not seen. And there was this ride, this iron ride, and we couldn't reach to it because we were little. And I saw this man with a mustache approaching. And I was a shy girl, but for some reason, I ran up to this man. And my father wore a mustache. So I instantly trusted a man with mustache. And I asked him, could you please help us to play with that ride? And he gladly agreed, I remember. And he spent so much time with us. It felt like it was hours. And then my friend ran away. And I remember thinking, how dare she run away? She's so ungrateful. This man spent so much time with us. I will thank him somehow. And so I remember it was fall and he showed me his gloves and they're worn out. And he kind of like threw them by the pine tree. There's like pine trees. And I remember thinking, oh my God, he used up his gloves. Like I'm gonna show him, I'll thank him. And so, and the abusers know. They pick these kids who can't defend themselves. They're like have this like victimhood energy about them. So, it was 2 girls. The other girl ran away. I didn't. I felt like I owed him something. Like 5 years old, where did I get this from? From previous lives? Like some people think if you're abused as a child, it must mean something you're carrying over from previous lives. We don't know that. Possibly. So he started walking away. And hiding behind those giant pine trees. And then he would poke his head out. And he kept leading me and walking me away from that group, from my kindergarten group. And I was following him. And I remember already feeling something off. I was scared. But I had this like deep, like, I must pay him back for what, he did for us. So... and I was following him, and he kept poking his head and calling me like this with his finger, deeper and deeper into the woods. And then at some point, instead of poking his head, something was sticking out from the tree. And it was his penis. I didn't know what it was. I've never seen anything like this. And he then poked his head out, and he's like, come, touch it. Don't be scared. Come, touch it. And I remember it felt wrong, but I wanted to run away, but I was struggling like, yeah, but I have to do what he says because he did what we wanted. Now I have to do what he wanted. I remember thinking that way. And so I was approaching and I was about to I ran away. I didn't touch it, but I was opposed to it and I ran away and I didn't tell anybody. And I remember I was so ashamed and scared. And I remember, okay, nobody has to know about this. And then the second time I was 8 years old, and I was in this hallway going up to the 5th floor to knock at my friend's apartment. And this guy stopped me like on the 2nd floor, pushed me hard to the wall. It was fall again. I was wearing stockings. I was 8, and he put his fingers through my stockings into my little vagina, and it was so painful, I remember. And he shut my mouth, and he would just like, it was violent. I remember hurting so much, but I was so scared. And then someone opened the door downstairs. He got scared and he ran away. I ran up to the 5th floor. I was knocking on my friend's door. Nobody opened. I sat there for I don't know how long because I was scared that if I'm going to come out, the guy would still be there. I remember my knees were shaking the entire day. What did I think? Nobody has to know about this, because if they do, they will not love me, because somehow I created all of this, right? So, and my ex-boyfriend, who was a psychologist and a neuroscientist, and we were talking about our childhoods. And then I said to him, well, I had that in my childhood, but it's not a big deal. He goes like, what do you mean it's not a big deal? That's rape. And I'm like, well, I think my sexual abuse was the least of my worries, because I come from I had like a bucket of traumas from my childhood, right? For me, it was, my mother cheating, my father beating her to death and blood on the floor, alcohol. My mother was an alcoholic. So divorce when I was 12. My heart was torn apart. So the sexual abuse was like the least of my worries. But, who knows what caused me my 10-year depression. But, I'm sure it somehow got engraved into that sexual abuse. So it's not true that people don't say anything at the time they must be lying. It's not true. Children, young adults, teenagers, they just can't comprehend. And the deep sense of shame that somehow you are at fault for what happened to you. For whatever reason, it's there. I don't know how it happens. I don't know how it works. Nobody exactly knows. But we know that all people, all the girls and all the boys who went through sexual abuse feel the same way. This deep sense of unworthiness and isolation. You're alone. You just want to get away from the world. You want to stay in your box, right? And that's trauma. And, I've been working through, and it's possible to work through. It doesn't have to define you. In fact, it can be the making of you. Why do you think I'm doing this? I have to talk about this. Because in order to survive, I've survived. I can't say I'm thriving, but my goal is to thrive. I want to thrive. And that's why I'm doing this channel. And that's why I'm doing this sex coach certification, intense sex coaching certification, that I will be able to help people through their emotions. So what is sex coach? Sex coach is like life coach. When you're sexually thriving, you're thriving in life, because every cell of your body is alive. Thank you so much for listening. Very emotional video today. Subscribe, share it, like it, please comment, and I will see you in my next video.